تعجل بالقرآن من قبل أن يقضى إليك وحيه وقل رب زدني علما.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا، من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. So as you remember, we've been going through the Iman regarding the Day of Judgment and all of the different things that happen on the Day of Judgment. And the section we got up to was regarding Al-Hisab, the accountability that will happen on the Day of Judgment, the accountability that every person shall face on that day. So that is what we are going to discuss now. So Al-Hisab معناه توقيف الله عز وجل العباد على أعمالهم واطلاعهم عليها وتذكيرهم ما نسوه منها وتقريرهم بذلك. It is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold every person upon their actions. Every servant, all of them, will be made aware of their actions on that day, and every person will be reminded of everything that they did, even the things that they had forgotten. Things that they had forgotten they did in their lives. On that day you will be shown everything and reminded about everything, and you will have no choice but to admit and acknowledge all of those actions of yours that will be recorded precisely. دل عليه أدلة فمن الكتاب, and there are evidences that indicate that from the Quran, as some examples. قوله تعالى وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم أو تخفوه يحاسبكم به الله, that if you make apparent what is within yourself or you conceal it, whether you make apparent what is in of yourself or you conceal it, Allah will hold you accountable upon it. You will be held accountable upon your deeds, whether they are open to see or whether you hid them and conceal them. You will be accountable upon all of your deeds. In another ayah, فَوَرَبِّكَ لَنَسْأَلَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ عَمَّا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ, that by your Lord we will certainly question all of them about what they used to do. Every person will be questioned over what they used to do in this world, over their actions, their deeds. They will be questioned about everything. And also قوله تعالى إن إلينا إيابهم ثم إن علينا حسابهم. Allah mentioned that indeed to us is their return, and for us, upon us, is their accountability. that everyone will return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then everyone will face their accountability with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there are clear ayat in the Quran telling us that we will all face our accountability on that day for the actions and deeds that we did in this world. And it's mentioned in the hadith of Aisha radiyallahu anha قالت سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول, she says, I heard the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam say, ليس أحد يحاسب يوم القيامة إلا هلك, that there is no one who will face his accountability on that day except that he will be destroyed. فقلت يا رسول الله, so Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, O Messenger of Allah, أليس قد قال الله تعالى, did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not say, فأما من أوتي كتابه بيمينه فسوف يحاسب حسابا يسيرا, that the one who is given his book in his right hand, then he will be given an easy accountability. Did Allah not say this in the Quran? Aisha asked the Prophet ﷺ, the ones who are given their books in their right hand, they will have an easy accountability. She was asking the Messenger, she didn't understand, because the Messenger said, لَيْسَ أَحَدٌ يُحَاسَبُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ إِلَّا هَلَكَ, that anybody who has their accountability on that day will be destroyed. So Aisha radiallahu anha was asking, but what about when Allah said, whoever gets their book in their right hand, they will have an easy accountability. So then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما ذلك العرض وليس أحد يناقش الحساب يوم القيامة إلا عذب. The Messenger said, that, meaning the ones who are given their books in their right hand and they have an easy accountability, the Messenger said, that is al-ard. That is a type of accountability known as al-ard, whereby those people will be shown their deeds, it will be presented to them, and after that they are forgiven and walked on, they pass on. Al-ard, the presentation. Whereas there is another type, the Messenger said, the ones who are actually analyzed, their accounts are analyzed and discussed or debated, then those ones will be destroyed. We will come to see that in a moment, that there are two types of accountability that occur on the Day of Judgment. One is known as al-ard and the other one al-munaqasha. The ones who have al-ard, that is the easy accountability. But the ones who fall into the other type, the munaqasha, they are the ones who are destroyed. وفي رواية مسلم من نوقش الحساب هلك, that whomsoever has his accountability analyzed in detail and discussed and debated, then that individual will be destroyed. مسائل تتعلق بالحساب. So now we understand that there will certainly be this accountability on the Day of Judgment. There are a few different topics and issues connected to this accountability that will occur on that day. ينقسم الحساب إلى عرض ومناقشة. That the accountability on that day, it is two types. One known as the ard, the presentation of your deeds, you are shown your actions and then forgiven and moved on. And the other, the munaqasha, where the analysis occurs, the deep analysis and discussion over your deeds, then you are destroyed if that occurs. Two types. And they are mentioned in that hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha we just mentioned. When Aisha radiallahu anha asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what about the ayah about those who are given the book in their right hand, they will have an easy accountability? The Messenger said that is the ard. As for the one who has the munaqasha, they will be destroyed. So that hadith is an evidence that we have these two types of accountability that occur on that day. What are they in detail? أما المقصود بالعرض. As for the intent behind al-ard, أن تعرض على المؤمن أعماله حتى يعرف منة الله عليه في ستر ذنوبه عليه في الدنيا وعفوه عنها في الآخرة. The ard, it is when a person will be shown his actions, the things that you did in this world, all of the deeds that you did in this world, a person will be shown all of those actions. And so that person will then recognize the great blessing of Allah upon him. Because out of all of those actions, there are of course going to be some sins and wrong things the person had done as well. So when he is shown all of his actions, and there are some wrongs in there as well, he will then recognize how Allah has given the bounty to him, the blessing to him, and how Allah has concealed and hidden those sins and wrongs of that person in this world, and how Allah has forgiven him for those wrongs and sins in the afterlife. ولعل مما يشهد له حديث عائشة عند أحمد فقد روى الإمام أحمد أن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت. So it is mentioned in a hadith collected by Al-Imam Ahmad from Aisha radiallahu anha, an evidence for this, where Aisha radiallahu anha said, سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول في بعض صلاته. She said, I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say in a part of his prayer, during his prayer, Allahumma hasibni hisaban yasira. O Allah, hold me to accountability with an easy accountability. Make my accountability an easy accountability. فَلَمَّا انصَرَفَ. So Aisha said, I heard the Messenger saying that dua when he was praying, in his prayer. Oh Allah, give me an easy accountability. So when the Messenger finished the prayer, Aisha radiallahu anha said to him, Ya Nabi Allah, O Prophet of Allah, Mal hisabul yasir. What is this easy and light accountability? Because the messenger was making dua for Allah to give him that easy and light accountability in the prayer. Aisha heard. So when he finished, Aisha said, what is this light and easy accountability? What is that? So the messenger said, أن ينظر في كتابه فيتجاوز عنه. That the light and easy accountability on that day is that your book of deeds is examined or looked into. Your book of deeds is there and it is looked into, but you are pardoned. You are excused and pardoned, even though in that book of deeds you have some sins and wrong things. It is looked into it, but you are forgiven and pardoned. That is the light and easy accountability. But then the messenger said, إِنَّهُ مَنْ نُوقِشَ الْحِسَابِ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَا عَائِشَةَ هَلَكَ. But the one who is analyzed into his accountability, looked into in detail and discussed and debated over that, then that type of person will be destroyed. So you see the difference. The easy and light accountability is when the actions are presented, your actions that you did are there, they are shown, but you are forgiven and allowed to go. That is the easy accountability. But then others, they will have their actions there and they won't just be allowed to pass. There's going to be an analysis of all of their actions. If the analysis starts on your actions, you'll be destroyed. Because if the analysis starts on all of them, there are going to be so many sins and evil deeds and things you have done, and everything is looked into like that, then you will be destroyed. When the analysis and review in detail occurs of your deeds. وجاءت صفة العرض, and there is a hadith where it mentions how the ard occurs on that day, how the easy and light accountability known as the ard, just the presentation of your deeds and then passing them, how that will happen exactly. There is a hadith. جاءت صفة العرض في حديث النجوى المشهور ففي الصحيحين أن رجلا سأل ابن عمر رضي الله عنه في النجوى فقال سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول يدنى المؤمن من ربه حتى يضع عليه كنفه فيقرره بذنوبه تعرف ذنب كذا يقول أعرف يقول ربي أعرف مرتين فيقول سترتها في الدنيا وأغفرها لك اليوم ثم تطوى صحيفة حسناته وأما الآخرون أو الكفار فينادى على رؤوس الأشهاد هؤلاء الذين كذبوا على ربهم ألا لعنة الله على الظالمين. It mentions in this hadith what happens in brief, that those people who are given the ard, the presentation of their deeds and then passed, that they are presented their deeds and they are asked, do you recognize all of these actions you did? And they will say yes. And there are sins in there, and they will say yes, I recognize that sin I did, I acknowledge that sin I did. They will acknowledge and have to admit that they did do these sins and wrong things. But then Allah will say to them, سَتَرْتُهَا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَأَغْفِرُهَا لَكَ الْيَوْمِ, that I concealed these sins of yours in the world, in the dunya when you were there. I concealed these sins of yours. And on this day, I forgive and pardon those sins for you. And so that individual is given that light accountability and he can go. He is pardoned and forgiven. He accepts and admits those errors, but there is no detailed analysis and breakdown that occurs. He is allowed to pass upon that. And as for the disbelievers and the wrongdoers, of course, they are not passed just like that. They are analyzed on their deeds and then they are destroyed as a consequence. And that is the second type, the munaqasha. أما المناقشة فهي استقصاء الأعمال صغيرها وكبيرها أو صغيرها وكبيرها. That the munaqasha is breaking down every aspect of your actions one by one, detailing everything and analyzing everything one by one. The big things you did and the minor things you did, everything. As we say now, under a magnifying glass, meaning everything will be picked out and everything will be looked at and analyzed. وَالتَّدْقِيقِ فِي ذَلِكَ. And in precision, everything will be analyzed and looked at. وَعَدَمِ الْمُسَامَحَةِ عَلَيْهَا. And nothing will be pardoned and just forgiven. فَمَنْ نُوقِشَ الْحِسَابِ بِهَذِهِ الطَّرِيقَةِ هَلَكَ بِلَا رَيْبٍ. So whoever has his deeds analyzed and broken down like that, in precision, then certainly that person will be destroyed. إِذِ الْإِنسَانُ لَيْسَ بِمَعْصُومٍ مِّنَ الْمَعَاصِي. Because a person is not devoid of sins. Every person has sins and wrongs. فَكَيْفَ إِنْ حُوسِبَ عَلَى التَّقْصِيرِ فِي جَنْبِ اللَّهِ. So then what will be the state of that person if he is held accountable regarding the rights of Allah? The rights of Allah that you fell short in, the rights of Allah that you did not fulfill. If every single one of those things is brought out on that day and laid out and presented to you, and you are picked out on everything, then certainly you will be destroyed. ومن أمثلة ما ورد في المناقشة ما جاء عند الترمذي في ذكر أول من تسعر بهم النار. And from the examples of the people who are given the munaqashah, they are analyzed and their actions are picked out and looked at. So with that munaqashah happens, they are destroyed. One of the examples of that is the famous hadith about the three individuals, the three people who are thrown into the hellfire. One of them in that hadith, it mentions رَجُلٌ استشهد في سبيل الله, a man who was martyred in the path of Allah. Martyred in the path of Allah. So on the day of judgment, he will be shown his accountability. He will be shown all of the blessings he was given and everything, and he will accept and admit all of those things. And then it will be said to him, all of these things that you were given in the dunya, what did you do with all of that? He will say, قَاتَلْتُ فِيكَ حَتَّى اسْتُشْهِدْتُ. He will say, I fought in your path, O Allah, until I was killed, I was martyred fighting in your path. Was he actually killed fighting? He was. He was. And so on the day of judgment, he will say, I fought for your sake. قَاتَلْتُ فِيكَ, for your sake, for Allah. And I was killed for your sake, martyred in the path for you. But then it will be said to him, كَذَبْتَ, you have lied. even though he did die like that. But it will be said to him, you have lied. إِنَّمَا قَاتَلْتَ لِيُقَالْ جَرِيء. You only fought so that the people would call you courageous and brave. Meaning you were only doing it to show off. You only used to go out and fight in the battlefield, not for the sake of Allah, not for the sake of Allah, but for the sake of the people. Because you wanted the people to praise you, to say, look how brave so and so is. He goes out and fights in the path of Allah. Courageous, not afraid of the enemies. You wanted the praise of the people. You wanted showing off. You never fought for the sake of Allah. And so look how the analysis is done. Even though what people saw when he died, people saw and thought he died for the sake of Allah. Fighting in jihad, died for the sake of Allah. But on that day when the munaqasha happens, the analysis happens, then it becomes clear that he never fought for the sake of Allah. He fought for the sake of the people, for the praise. إِنَّمَا قَاتَلْتَ لِيُقَالْ جَرِيء وَقَدْ قِيلْ. And the people did used to say that. They used to say how brave you are, how courageous. They used to say those things. So then it mentions in the hadith that he is dragged on his face until he is thrown into the hellfire. Another individual in that hadith is a man who learnt knowledge and learnt the Quran, and he used to teach people the Quran. And so on the day of judgment, that's what he will say, that I studied and I learnt the Quran, and I used to teach people Quran, your speech, the speech of Allah. I used to teach people that. Did he? He did. He used to do it. He used to teach people Quran. An excellent action. But on the day of judgment, again it will be said, kadhabt. You have lied. Even though he did used to do it. But then it will be said to him, you only used to teach the people the Quran, liyuqal qari'. So people would say, what a beautiful reciter he is. You only used to teach people so you could show off with your recitation and your voice. You only wanted to show off. So people would say, MashaAllah, that teacher, have you heard him? Have you heard his voice? Have you heard how he recites? That's the only reason you used to teach people. You never really taught them for the sake of Allah to teach them Quran. You were just doing that and holding the circles and things and teaching Quran so people could hear you and praise you for how beautiful you are. وَقَدْ قِيلْ. And they used to do that. They used to praise that person and say what a beautiful reciter he is and give him all of that praise. So he taught the Quran to people, but not for the sake of Allah. He used to teach them for showing off. So it's mentioned, he will be dragged on his face and thrown into the hellfire. In that same hadith, there is a third individual. The third individual it mentions in the hadith, وَرَجُلٌ وَسَّعَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. A person who Allah gave a lot of wealth to. He was a rich man in this dunya. So on the day of judgment, when he is shown everything, all the blessings he had, all of the wealth he was given in this dunya, and it will be said to him, what did you do with all of that? Everything that you were given in the dunya. He was a rich man. He was given a lot of money and wealth. He will say, ما تركت من سبيل تحب أن ينفق فيها إلا أنفقت فيها. That I did not leave any pathway that you love charity should be given towards, except that I gave charity in those pathways. I gave charity everywhere. And did he used to give charity everywhere with his money? He did. He used to give charity everywhere. He did. He used to give his money out. So on the day of judgment, he will say, I gave charity everywhere for your sake, O Allah. But again it will be said to him, كذبت, you have lied. You only gave that charity ليقال جواد, so people would say, look how generous this man is. So again, he only wanted to show off. He was only giving in charity everywhere, so people would say, look how generous he is, look how kind he is, what a good man he is. وَقَدْ قِيلَ, and that's exactly what the people did used to say about him. So he spent his money in charity, but not for the sake of Allah, for the sake of the people to show off. So he will also be dragged on his face and thrown into the hellfire. Those are examples of people who are given the munaqasha on their accountability on that day, when their actions and deeds are analyzed and broken down, and it becomes clear that they did not do them sincerely for the sake of Allah. They did them for the sake of the people. So it's very important to think about that. These three people were thrown in the hellfire for sins or for acts of obedience, as it looked like. As it looked like they were doing acts of obedience, fighting in the path of Allah, teaching the Quran, giving in charity. These are actions of obedience and worship. And yet they are thrown in the hellfire for those actions of apparent obedience and worship, because of their intention. Their intention was not for the sake of Allah with those actions. It was for the sake of the people. So a person needs to think very carefully about himself and what he does. Is he doing what he is doing for the sake of Allah alone, sincere and pure? Or is he doing what he is doing for the sake of the people, to keep people happy, to keep others happy, to keep the people in your good books? Is that what your intention is? Is that why you do what you do and say what you say? Then remember, on Yawmul Qiyamah, the people, they will not be able to put you into paradise. The people will not help you and do anything for you on that day. So do not do your actions to keep people happy, or to keep people in the good books, or to keep people praising you. Do not do your actions for those reasons. On Yawmul Qiyamah, you will find nothing to benefit you if you do that now. In one narration it mentions, اذهبوا إلى من كنتم تراؤون في الدنيا هل تجدون عندهم من جزاء. Go to the ones that you used to show off in front of. See if they will give you any reward now. On the Day of Judgment, will they give them anything? Nothing. So think carefully about your actions and your deeds, that you do them purely and sincerely for the sake of Allah, not for the sake of the people. So that is the munaqasha. Another issue then, so now we understand we have the ard, the presentation, and that is the easy accountability. And then you have the munaqasha, the analysis and the breakdown, and that is where the destruction occurs. Another issue, مسألة أخرى, هل يحاسب الكفار أم لا يحاسبون? The disbelievers, the kuffar, who died as kuffar, will they get accountability on the Day of Judgment? Because a kafir, if he's a kafir, died as a kafir, then he's definitely going to hellfire. So is there any need for accountability to happen for the kafir? He's going to go to hellfire anyway. So is there any accountability for the kafir on that day? Does this type of hisab and accountability happen for the disbelievers? As-sawab al-maqtu'u bih أنهم يحاسبون محاسبة تقريع وتوبيخ. That they are given an accountability. Absolutely, definitely they are. But a person might say, but why? If they are going to go to hellfire anyway, then why? It is as a form of rebuke upon them, to show them, look, this is what you did. And that's why you're going into the hellfire now, to show them and rebuke them. These are your actions, these are your deeds. This is the evil that you did. So they are shown all of those things as a rebuke upon them, as a type of, there's a word in English for tawbih. What do they call it in English? There's a good word for it, I forget. Like, you know, when you're telling off a child as well, and not admonition, more than that, more severe. Scolding, perhaps, something along those lines. But the meaning of it is when you're holding someone to account and you're rebuking them and you're putting them in their place. That is the point of the accountability of the kuffar on that day. And that is mentioned in some of the ayat in the Quran. In Surah Al-An'am, وَلَوْ تَرَى إِذْ وُقِفُوا عَلَى رَبِّهِمْ قَالَ أَلَيْسَ هَذَا بِالْحَقِّ قَالُوا بَلَى وَرَبِّنَا قَالَ فَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابَ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْفُرُونَ. That when the disbelievers, they are stood before their Lord on that day, and it is said to them, is this not the truth? What you did and your actions and these affairs, they will say, yes, it is our Lord. They will accept and they will recognize everything on that day then, and they will admit. So then it will be said to them, قَالَ فَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابَ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْفُرُونَ. So taste the punishment now for what you used to do. Taste the punishment for what you used to do. In other ayat, it mentions as well, وَيَوْمَ يُنَادِيهِمْ فَيَقُولُ مَاذَا أَجَبْتُمُ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. On that day when they are called forth and it is said to them, what did you answer the messengers? How did you behave and reply to the da'wah of the messengers? So they will have their accountability. They will have their accountability. وأما الأدلة التي يفهم منها نفي الحساب عن الكافرين. And there are some evidences that you might think they mean that the kuffar don't get any hisab like this, accountability like this. For example, وَلَا يُسْأَلُ عَنْ ذُنُوبِهِمُ الْمُجْرِمُونَ. That they are not asked. The disbelievers are not asked about their sins. لَا يُسْأَلُ عَنْ ذُنُوبِهِمْ. They are not asked about their sins. Who? Al-Mujrimun. The wrongdoers are not questioned about their sins, meaning they are not given the accountability. That is what some people may have understood from this evidence. However, when you put together all of the evidences, then it becomes clear that in reality, all of them are given that accountability. They are rebuked upon their actions and they are shown what they did in their deeds, and then they are punished thereafter. We have to stop there for a short lesson this week. But we'll carry on with the rest of the section regarding the accountability. There's going to be more topics yet, like the prophets and messengers. Do they get accountability on that day of judgment? And then after that, one of the big topics is, how is the actual accountability then shown and done? It is with the weighing scale on that day. There is a balance, the wazn, the mizan, the weighing scale on that day, where your deeds are weighed up. And that is a very interesting section. How are your deeds weighed up? There are many different opinions. Do you yourself get put into the weighing scale? There are some evidences about that too. So we're going to get on to that from next week, inshaAllah ta'ala. Make sure you keep up with the mosque social media accounts and things for the lesson timings, because sometimes the lesson time changes. Sometimes we might start before Isha prayer. So you have to keep up with the social media accounts of the mosque, or in the groups, WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups that the brothers have. Sign up to them so that you know every week what time the class is going to start, inshaAllah. So we have to conclude upon that for today. I'm a little bit short on time today, but inshallah ta'ala, we'll continue with it from next week. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.